The data is quite conclusive. Young people around the world are struggling. Research in books such as The Anxious Generation highlight the negative effects of technology and social networks on our students. We also know that two common themes in international schools are academic pressure and high expectation for students applying to university. On a more positive note, we are seeing a growing trend of schools placing greater emphasis on a holistic approach to supporting students. In this interview, we learn about how the Dean of Students at one school helps lead and coordinate efforts to stay ahead of these trends. We speak with Andy Vaughan, a Dean of Students, about his role in providing leadership to help students develop the life skills needed to overcome struggles and chart their pathway toward full and healthy lives. Our guiding questions were, what does the Dean of Students do? How has the role of Dean of Students evolved over time? What trends are you observing around this role in international schools going forward? Here are a few of the topics covered in this episode. The impetus for an evolution of the Dean of Students role at Andy's school, a breakdown of the job description, the importance of using data to support students, lessons learned from the role, observations about digital wellness, advice on how to move into leadership positions, trends in the role of Dean of Students and in international schools in general. The show was recorded on June 22, 2025. We invite you to bask in the warmth of Andy's caring and thoughtful demeanor as he shares about this very important role in international schools. We believe this show is a wonderful PSA for why all schools should have a Dean of Students or something similar.
Hi, Andy. Welcome to the show.
Morning, Audrey. How are you?
Oh, I'm great, thank you. So we always start by asking where in the world our guests are. So please tell us where you are.
So right now it is our summer break at ISB, which is where I work, and I'm currently in New Zealand, visiting family. So in Christchurch, New Zealand, and about to drive up to our home in a few hours, which will be wonderful.
Fantastic. Now, it's not really summer in New Zealand, right?
No, when you work in these international schools, you get used to the North American lingo. So we use North American terms now, and I say tomato, not tomato. And obviously, right now it's definitely winter here, and there's a frost outside, so it's kind of negative something. Yeah.
Well, it's a nice change from Bangkok, I guess.
It is. It's a good break from the heat.
Yeah. So we would like to ask if you have a going global story to share with us.
Sure. I started my education in New Zealand, and we got kind of stuck here wondering what to do in terms of going overseas. And somebody who had worked overseas kind of told us and shared with us about what's happening overseas. And that springboarded us into some great positions. We worked in the Philippines and then into Bangkok, where I went through a number of different jobs. But at the core of my experiences were really getting chances to get to know people and get to know cultures in the places where I've gone to. And it's been pretty fantastic in both these different countries, working in the Philippines and now Thailand. And we've been a long time, 17 years at ISB,
Wow.
which is a very long time for most international teachers. But it's been wonderful kind of really digging into a community and a real part of that community where you feel like you actually set up a piece of life there and you're contributing in a deep and meaningful way to those communities. So we'll be talking about the role of Dean of Students today. And I've always had this passion to care about kids and how do you teach holistically as opposed to just the content that you have in front of you, and how do you educate young people to be great citizens of the world and caring global citizens, and really emphasizing that word caring and making sure they've got a heart for others and looking out for the world and for people around them. So it's been a great journey.
It's a lovely sentiment too, and I like how it kind of meshes in with your experience traveling the world and wanting to make connections and get to know people on a deeper level. And now that's translating into the role that you have currently. And it seems like ISB, International School Bangkok, Must be a pretty great place if you have stayed there for 17 years. I really love that.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, Audrey. Obviously we've been there a long time, and I'm involved in a lot of hiring of staff. And people often ask, what is it about ISB? And we say it's the people that are there, and that kind of ties back to a great saying out of New Zealand. There's a Māori whakatoki, which is a proverb, and what's the most important thing on earth? It says, and the answer is it's the people, it's the people, it's the people. And I think for us, being at ISB has been about these great connections. And we're a unique school because the school sits in this fantastic Nichitatani, which is a small community. And you get to live and work with the kids you teach, and you see them out of school. And I know that's not everyone's cup of tea, but when you're there for a long time also, then you become part of a stable part of the community, which is unique in international schools because there's a lot of change and movement in many schools, and feel pretty blessed to be in a situation where we're doing something a little bit different to other educators maybe that jump around the world and see a lot of the world. We've made the decision to stay and have that stability for our kids and family and also the community.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Well, I've got a couple quick ISB stories. I live in Bangkok as well, even though I'm in the US right now. So I was out at Chatuchak Market maybe 5 months ago, and I was in an artist, they have a little artist colony in his gallery. And a woman walks up and I said, "Oh, how's it going?" She goes, "Well, it's going well. This is one of my favorite artists, and we're here for a curriculum meeting or a team meeting." And I go, "Wow, I'd like to be at your school." And she shared, "Oh, we're at ISB and we're out here shopping and having a meeting at the same time and checking out the art." And then when I turned to the artist, he knew her because he's the artist in residence at ISB. So a double connection to your fabulous school. And that was a lot of fun. A couple laughs shared at that moment. All right. As you said, one of our topics today, our big topic, is about your role, but an underlying topic is leadership. And where does one go as a leader in making a difference, as you're saying, in the lives of the students? So we've got a 3-parter guiding question for you. What does a dean of students do? How has the role of dean of students evolved over time? What trends are you observing around this role in international schools going forward? So we're coming at you from a lot of different angles. And I think let's start off first just with the role of dean of students, how it was created and why was it created? If Andy, you could share about that.
Sure. This position was actually created before I came into the role. It was created probably about nearly 14, 15 years ago. We used to have a principal position and an assistant principal, which is often a very normal setup. And, the dean of students role really was to be much more student-centered and student-focused. As a school, we have had typically an AP or IB pathway in the past, and it was to separate out some of the curriculum piece from those two AP roles and allow the role to become much more student-driven in terms of the focus of the role. So obviously it's been around for quite a long time, but what does a dean of students do? Some people typically see the dean of students as the discipline person. And I think that's that can be seen that way in some schools, that this person handles the student discipline and student management. But typically that role really works with any student support. Yes, it can be student discipline as well. And there's a lot of management that takes place in terms of student activities, student life, or a lot of those roles all come underneath the dean of students' purview. That's how it works at ISB. It really allows somebody to have the time to dig into cases and situations that need a little bit more time and support, and also provide a school-wide perspective. So the role has been quite integral at ISB, and we've emulated the same role in the middle school to allow there to be a through thread throughout the whole school. And we're now also in the elementary kind of naming one of those positions more of a dean of students type position, so that you can create some consistency across the whole school in terms of policy and practices and how that works. In terms of how it's evolved over time, as I said initially, I think some people have seen that as just a discipline role. That's the person who will sort out the kids who are not turning up to class or doing something the wrong way. And I guess a big focus for myself, and I think others in this role across the international school scene, is how do you flip that and make it a proactive role? So how do you change that from being a negative type role where kids perceive this person as somebody who's scary, who can't be seen, to actually somebody who's really interested in caring about the student's development? And then also, I think the latest trends we're starting to see is a lot more use on data. And how do we use data to be more proactive? And how does data drive our conversations? And how do we get ahead of kids who could be having social emotional issues or academic issues before they actually come? So as our systems and as technology gets better, as we can look at data differently and manipulate it better, then we can start to see things happen earlier for kids and then put in proactive responses to make sure that kids don't necessarily go through big situations where they are ended up in a major depressive disorder or something like that, because we've seen it early and we've checked in on them early and we've provided counselling responses, or it might be that we've had an advisor who's checking on a child much more regularly. So I think that's been a big shift that I've noticed in the role in my time.
So I'm guessing as part of the systems that you're setting up, there are a lot of different tools that teachers have, advisory people have, and maybe in looking at wellness, we'll chat in a little while, in time, if students have a wellness profile that they're inputting data into, that they leave open for school people to take a look at from time to time, that you can build that profile and see changes. Does that make sense? Am I interpreting that correctly?
That's been a massive push that we've done at ISB. Using data has been incredible for us in terms of developing student profiles. So, we're using different platforms. We use a great platform called Mario, which checks in on kids' well-being. Kids check in every 2 weeks with that and just give an update of their well-being and where they're at. And then that data is instantly fed to their advisor. Then that data is also fed to their counselor. And then we also get a macro view as the dean of students. So there's these multiple levels that you can be checking where kids are at. With Google now, that Data Studio is another great opportunity to really dig into data and see where kids are at, when we use that to pull a bunch of different data points from students and create these data dashboards so that every child has a data piece which talks about their own social emotional well-being, and we're able to use that to help support them and have better conversations with kids. So that's been a big shift. I think, though, David, the other major shift that I've seen is just higher needs with social and emotional concerns with kids. We'll probably get onto that a little bit later on, but that's a big shift that we've seen, and also this need then for deans of students to have much better knowledge about social and emotional mental health conditions and how to work with diverse populations of kids. So that's a big shift as well for a dean of students, is understanding how you have conversations with kids based on where they're coming from. So you're almost moving more towards a counselling type role as the dean of students and less from the discipline model. And, using restorative practices, that's a big piece of the role now. A lot of people use trauma-informed, also research with kids or practices. And so I think that's a big shift that also we're seeing.
So I'm curious about some of that. So first of all, I'm not going to be the first person to say this, but I need to know, is there also a Luigi system? If there's a Mario, is there a Luigi?
Unfortunately
Okay,
not.
sorry. That was silly. But I'm curious, what's the sense you have of how comfortable kids are with sharing how they're really doing when they're doing these check-ins? I'm just curious if you've really gotten some very personal, very intimate kind of, I don't want to say confessions, but thoughts shared, or whether it tends to stay sort of more surface, and then you are able to pinpoint times where the thing they're saying might be hiding a deeper issue.
Yeah, great question, Audrey. I think that's a question that we get a lot of people asking us with software like this, where kids are checking in every 2 weeks. Are some kids just making up and ticking the box the whole way through? In some cases, we think that does happen. But I think the wonderful thing with the software now, the company we actually use, they can analyze where a kid moves their mouse and how much they change and adjust their self-ratings. So these kids, they'll do a self-rating, and often kids slide the self-rating 1 point and they'll adjust it 1 or 2 more times. That's quite normal. So that in itself is like a behavior analysis of the data that's in the back end of the system, which shows that kids are taking a little bit more time to do it. What we've always said because we've definitely had some naysayers who push back and say, oh, this is ridiculous. Why are these kids doing this? Our comment is, look, we want a place where any kid can actually say, I've got an issue. I need to reach out and ask for help. And if I can't do it face to face, I've got an opportunity to do it on a platform, which is fantastic. So a great example that I've shared with a few people was we had a kid earlier this year who, one of the sliders on this self-check-in for kids is a safety slider. And the kid actually put down a very unsafe, which was a big red flag. And there's an instant email that comes through. The counsellor checked in with the student that day. And the kid said, actually, you know what? No, everything's all fine. Not an issue. Went home, didn't hear anything about it. And then later that night, the kid actually emailed the counsellor, actually, can I come and talk to you tomorrow morning? Came back the next morning. This was part of a bigger situation. This allowed the counsellor then to put through this to the parents. It was actually very, very serious in the end. And so, you think about, okay, that would never have been found out, I don't think, if we just been saying, hey, how you doing? And the whole way, you need to have this intentional way of checking in with kids and to let them know that kids are cared for. We had a senior this year who came to ISB who our counsellors pull in our kids and check in with them at least once a semester. And we had the best compliment I think we've ever had, which is, you guys just care way too much. And so I was like, we finally got there where kids are complaining that they're cared for too much. So, there's some wonderful things when you get that kind of feedback. It's been really fantastic to see.
Well, thank you for that. That's good to hear. And as you say, even if it's only kind of a not clear indication, if it leads to something else.
Correct.
Worth it. And just, I'm guessing that, like you said, way too caring, if there's such a thing. That whole sense of belonging, that sense of someone's looking out for me, that sense of I feel connected. The fact that you're taking the time to let kids sit down and interact in this way, even if it's with a computer program, I think speaks volumes for what your school is all about.
Yeah, look, you're right. And I think you hit on a word there, which is belonging. International schools are so unique because the transient nature that we have. We typically have a lot of kids coming in and out in a year. We would have between 50 and 80 kids a year that come in new. So how do you make sure that those kids feel like they belong as soon as possible? And some of those kids are only at ISB for 2 or 3 years. And then how do you make sure you're checking on that and you're following through and then you put support structures in place for kids? I think in an international school, that's our biggest challenge is ensuring that all kids feel like they belong, especially with the cultural diversity that we have in our schools as well.
So before we started this program, as soon as I heard that you were Dean of Students, I thought, that's so cool. I think that's a role that a lot of schools really could stand to adopt if they didn't have one already. And because it, like you said, fits so neatly between kind of the academic, the discipline, and the counseling roles. I love the proactive nature of how you described it. I looked it up with ChatGPT because I thought, okay, what is a Dean of Students? And here's some things that came up, and I'm wondering whether or not any of these are part of your role. So I'm just going to read each one and maybe you can speak to it. So number 1 was uphold a high standard of academic success and meet with students on probation and plan ways they can graduate. Is that anything like what you do?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have systems in place, and this is a big piece of checking in with kids. We understand that some kids struggle with learning, so I think it's maybe less about grades sometimes, and it's more about effort. So we grade effort and we grade academic success separately at ISB. So the main conversation that I'll have, definitely if kids are failing, we have conversations about what's going on, but typically we don't let kids fail is the key. We have a very strong philosophy that kids shouldn't fail and we should do everything we can to get them through. We grade kids on what's called the HOW, or habits and attitudes towards learning. So this is about engagement. It's about follow through, completion of homework and management of time, etc. On those areas when kids aren't actually engaging, then there are definitely conversations they have with the Dean of Students, because we know that the link is very clear that if you engage more in your learning, then your learning output is actually much higher. The correlation is bang on. Like we've correlated our HOW grades with our academic grades, and it's almost perfectly linear. So it's great to show kids that and to talk about why it's important, and helping kids develop executive functioning skills. But once again, it's a supportive approach, and I try and take this line of firm but fair, and that I don't mind if you don't actually know all the content, or if you're not achieving at a top grade, as long as you're trying your hardest. And if you put in your effort in, then we can't really fault you. And so that's a big piece. When kids are not putting the effort in and getting low grades, that's a very different conversation. And then we help kids with what that might look like. But then once again, it's systems that you put kids into. So we have a thing called one-to-one coaching for kids. So when kids are not doing so well, they get automatically put in this one-to-one coaching, where they have one class every second day, and that class is all about teaching them executive functioning skills and then giving them time to actually get through their homework in a supervised situation. And even that's evolved in my time. When I first came in, it used to be if you were failing, you got to put in a room, and you were kind of locked in that room for an hour for that block, and you had to do your homework, but there was no support to get there. So the shift I think we've seen is this moving away from a punitive approach to a supportive approach, and saying what's the root cause of the issue. Let's fix that. Let's support the kid, because most kids can achieve if they have the right tools to achieve, and they feel like they belong, and they've got the right support structures, and they've got somebody there as a champion who's saying, I believe in you. That's my deep belief anyway.
Wow. I absolutely love that. And talk about belonging and feeling like someone cares. It's wonderful. I bet that makes a big difference in so many kids' lives. And also, it strikes me that not a lot of kids are falling through the cracks at ISB.
No, we try to make sure it's that Swiss cheese approach, right? That you put as many different layers and different structures in place that, it's hopefully near impossible to get through the cracks and be completely missed. Yeah.
Wow. All right. Another aspect of the role of Dean of Students that I saw was more of the administrative side of things. So policies, admissions, class registration, student activities, and campus social events. Is that any part of your role?
Yes. A number of those areas are areas that I'll be part of the organization of them. We also have a CAS coordinator and service learning coordinator who supports with these areas. So, there's a huge team approach. I mean, we're very lucky at ISB. We're a big school. We have an athletic director. We've got an arts director. We've got our CAS service learning coordinator. This year, I think, of our student roll was about 1850. In terms of registrations for activities and arts and athletics, we were over 10,000 registrations. So Woo! Our kids are engaged in a huge amount of extracurricular activities, and it's part of that educating the whole child, right? So they're really, really busy, makes their life pretty unique and pretty fun. And so definitely part of those things is the policies and the structures to make sure that the things run smoothly for kids, and ensuring that kids don't get pulled in multiple directions. So at ISB, because we're a big school, my role is a bit more above the actual day-to-day organization of some of those pieces, and looking at structures or where we have issues, and then thinking about, how do we solve some conflicts that we might have? How do we solve issues that we have? And then looking at consistency with policy as well, which is a big thing. When you're in a big school with so much going on, how do you ensure that, the student experience on the other end stays the same? And so that requires a lot of teamwork within all our teams of, people who are organizing these events. But that is a big piece of the role too.
Well, what I'm starting to gather is that Dean of Students kind of is the big connector of the school and has their finger somewhat on the pulse of a variety of different aspects of school, and always with the kind of bottom line goal of making sure kids are taken care of, that they're enjoying their experience, that they feel like they belong, and that they're, again, not slipping through the cracks. It just sounds like such a key role, really, truly, if you can, if you have the opportunity to hire somebody to do this.
Yeah, and you have to be dedicated to spend a lot of time at school, because you need to be visible. You've got to be at as many events as you can be. So ideally, I'll try to be pretty much at every single event that I can be at, so the kids see that visibility. That means that you know what's going on. It means that you got your finger on the pulse. And then also, it's the same as a kid whose parent turns up to watch them play sport. If kids see the Dean of Students comes and watches at the sideline of a game, or is watching a recital or the play, then it shows they care. And so I think that's really important to be visible and support student initiatives, service initiatives. You don't have to necessarily be organizing them, but it's there engaging with kids and seeing what they're doing and valuing what they're doing too.
Yeah, that makes so much sense too. And I would say that about any staff member that goes and attends the events, that it really means a lot to the kids to see you there. And you get to see the kids in a different way than when they're in the classroom as well. So, but it is a big investment as well. So, okay, another aspect that came up on my chat GPT was that the Dean of Students creates initiatives to improve student wellness and handles across campus communications about health and counseling services. And you've kind of already spoken to that, but anything more you want to say on that?
Yeah, and I think this is the other one. We had the Dean of Students role in the past. When I first came in, we didn't have an advisory structure. So the advisory system is something that we've put in, and we've put a lot of time into making that work at ISB. And advisory in high school, as most high school teachers would know, is very difficult to get right. So it's a tricky one. And when we first did it, we had all these high hopes and ambitions of how kids would love it. And we got terrible reviews after our first year. This was this is when I first came to the job about 9 years ago. And we worked hard to change and adjust and consistently ask kids, what should we change and how should we do things differently? And, we've gotten to a point now where kids really start to see the value in it. Obviously, not every single student loves advisory, but it's become a real integral part of our SEL program. And trying to find the balance of how do you deliver SEL curriculum and lessons, because kids are obviously not getting health the whole way through to their senior years. How do you do that? But also for us, it's about making sure that we have a very clear vision of kids getting to know each other and feeling part of a community. So we created a really neat system where kids go all the way through school from grade 9 to 12 in the same advisory group, that the group is intentionally mixed up, keeping kids separate from friends as much as possible. So they have to learn to get on with kids who they don't know. And that kind of teaches them this great life skill of how do you get on with people in a workplace where you may not have known them before. And that's been a real success in terms of seeing how that's evolved over the years.
So let me jump in there. That takes me back to Aberdeen, Scotland in the 90s, where I was a counselor of a tiny school, oil patch school. And I remember writing the curriculum for advisory. And then at different schools, whether I was involved in advisory or just seeing it from another division, knowing how difficult it is to make it work and all the different aspects of it. And one of the big ones for teachers is, all right, these students are coming in. What am I going to do? And as you were just saying, having that written curriculum, and something tells me in today's world, one would get the students to help write that curriculum, and it would be needs-based and things like that. So I think we've got Audrey, we have a whole other show where we could talk about the development of an advisory system, how to make it work, to use Jim Reese's terms, give it legs so it's going to be sustainable. So we'll table that one, but I'm really glad that you brought it up.
Yeah, I could talk for hours with you, David. Super passionate about it.
Yeah. Definitely.
Oh, good. So we've already got a bid in there to have you back, Andy. I love that. Any other aspects of your job description that you'd like to share with us?
It's funny, Audrey, some parents and some teachers will say, I can't believe you do this job. It's, just so much. And then you're also dealing with the discipline side, and you've got some serious mental health stuff that you deal with too with kids. And I kind of want to highlight those two pieces because you are pulled into all the serious discipline situations and serious mental health issues with kids. And I always say I see this as a complete privilege to work with kids as they go through these big life-changing moments. When a kid really messes up in school or makes a really poor choice, it's this ability to actually rewire their brain and actually help them rethink life and work out how to approach these situations in the future differently. And it's incredible to have that privilege to be in this kind of role where you can work with kids and families and help kids kind of work out who they are. And, I think that's a big piece of the job where a lot of people don't understand it fully. It's not a discipline piece. Okay, a kid that makes a major mistake, here's the big consequence. Actually, that's a very small piece of it. It's how do you take a restorative approach? How do you work with parents to allow the parents to know that their kids are just young people who are working at life? How do you work with kids to help them restore their relationships with those around that they've damaged? And how do you also help them build confidence in themselves? And at the same time, that's, with the discipline side, but also with mental health, working with kids who are really struggling, and you have to be pretty creative in ideas and pull a big team approach, working with counselors, with the school psych and everyone else to work out how to really support kids when they're going through major crises in their life. But seeing those kids come out on the other side is just incredible, and I think might be probably the most satisfying thing in the job. It's just amazing to see a student turn it around and work out life and then just really flourish after that point.
So I noticed that you said you got pulled into these things. Is it sometimes a little bit of a gray area between dean of students and counselor and vice principal or assistant principal who'd often deal with discipline issues? Is that sometimes get a little tricky, or do you have pretty clear roles described?
Sure. We don't have an assistant principal at ISB, so we have a principal, a dean of students, and a dean of academics. So that's the structure that we use. And what we've always said is counsellors, we've made a clear policy that counsellors should not the delivery of discipline for students. They can help with some of the kids in terms of some of their understanding and the counselling that happens after there. But that side, it has to come from the dean of students role. And when it gets really serious, then it would also involve the principal. But it tends to fall predominantly on my position in the school we're in. And that works pretty well because it's a clean line. Kids know who to talk to, teachers know who to refer to, counsellors know who to refer up to, and parents also know. So it becomes a central position that is seen as, I guess, one place of consistency, which is really important because you have to be super consistent with discipline. And I think that's helped create a consistent culture within the school of what's expected.
And now we're going to pause for a moment
to share a special message.
Hello, listeners. We are so happy and grateful that you're here with us. And now, for a minute, we're going to get real.
Our mission, as you probably know, is to inform aspiring and existing international educators about the nature of this wonderful lifestyle. For 3 years now, we've worked hard to live up to that mission. We spend hours creating content, liaising with guests, and editing these shows for broadcast. As you know, we love providing this public service, and it helps us tick all of our personal PERMA boxes.
For sure. But here's something a lot of you may not know. We're actually paying out of our own pockets to do this. It costs money to record and host our shows and to run our website. So we're here to ask you a favor.
We are. Would you kindly consider sponsoring us through Patreon? For less than the cost of a cup of coffee per month, you could be helping us break even in terms of these costs. If you feel you're getting value from these shows and from our information hub, and if you can afford it, please go to www.patreon.com/educatorsgoingglobal, and we'll have that link in our show notes to make it easy for you.
We have a couple tiers for your effort to support us. Tier 1 is experience, and there you're just giving us money to support us. And tier 2 is exploration, the chance to join live Q&As with experts.
You gotta love that little bit of punning on the EGG. Thanks once again, honestly, for your interest in traveling, teaching, and connecting with us.
And now, back to our regular programming.
Let's go. Well, I really like that you said you've now got, or is it just next year, you're starting having a dean of students all the way up through, so that, like you said, there's that consistency, and they know by the time they get to high school, they know what it is. And they probably have developed a relationship as well where they feel comfortable sharing. It sounds like they don't feel like they're in trouble, just more that they need support right now for this thing that happened. And also, I like that you talk about it as an opportunity for restorative practices that can help them, regain their good name and so on. It's really beautiful. It's like parenting, isn't it?
It is very, very similar. I've got about 650 kids that are my children.
Nice.
Well, speaking of parenting, one of the things, let's say you're listening to this episode and you're thinking about going overseas. One of the generalizations I think I can get away with is maybe it's the whole world, or maybe because I spent a lot of time in Asia, a lot of these students have immense pressure on them, academic pressure. And in some of these countries, maybe it's the second, third, fourth generation out of poverty. And the parents, they have a lot of pressure from their parents to continue the work that maybe the great grandparents started or the grandparents. And that is passed down to the children to work hard, to perform with academics, and then go to, fortunately, one of these wonderful international schools where academics, in the end, and we're going to talk about this, are just very difficult to deal with. And when you can send your child to a school like ISB, and there are lots of schools that have these support systems and proactive stances, some do it much better than others. I just want to paint that picture a little bit so some of our listeners can understand what it can be like for these students, because they might just go, oh, these are well-to-do students, life must be great. Yet they have their own pressures. And then we get to the normal life of teenagers living in the world of social networks. And we're going to get at digital wellness in just a second. So I was going to ask a little bit more about the evolution of your role. But again, just like Audrey was pointing out, you're getting to our questions nicely before we even ask them. So let me ask more. What are some lessons learned from your role as Dean of Students over the years?
David, I think it's also a lesson learned from leadership over the years. It's been to listen, I think, is number one, and taking time to really understand the core of what's going on underneath. And I think one of my biggest mistakes as a young leader was jumping in and making a judgment quickly and taking something on the face value, as opposed to taking time and truly understanding what's going on in a situation. So I think that's been a big lesson in terms of leadership and in terms of how to work with kids. And I think it's very hard because the pressures that can exist within the job too, of, trying to get through the amount of workload that you have. Sometimes you want to quickly rush things, but you can't rush these conversations that you have at this role. And, relationships aren't formed through rushed moments in life. They're formed through quality and, quality time with kids. So that's been a big piece, which I think I've taken away from the role. But it's interesting, you spoke about, the pressure on these kids, and it is immense. That they've got a lot they're having to do. The parents are paying a lot of money to go to ISB or other international schools. We're all very similar. And the expectation is that their child will go through and will go to university, college, and they are going to be successful, and they're going to carry on a family business, or they're going to do something similar, and they're going to make a difference in the world. So it's a real challenge because, we also have some kids that are coming from different backgrounds, and, we have US Embassy kids that come through, and some of those kids are quite normal kids from stateside, and suddenly they're thrown in the mix here with really high-end achieving kids or super wealthy students. I mean, obviously, a lot of our international schools, ours included, have some very, very wealthy families, and that's quite a challenge to be amongst those. But also understanding that within that wealth, there's incredible poverty. So there's another side to the coin as well, which is some of our kids whose parents have big businesses. They have all the money in the world, but they don't necessarily have the family connection sometimes too. And I'll never forget it. My wife came home from work a number of years back, and she had actually said to the kids once in a class, she said, "Look, you guys are super privileged. You got to understand your privilege. You have everything you want. It's so easy for you." And she was a bit frustrated with them because they hadn't been achieving as they should have. And a girl put her hand up and said, "Actually, we don't have everything." She said, "Actually, I haven't seen my dad for about 3 weeks. He works all the time." And my wife kind of said, "Well, who else feels the same way?" And most of the kids in the class put their hands up. Their parents are so busy working. And I think that's the interesting side too, is sometimes these high expectations, but parents are so busy sometimes that they don't get the chance to actually really spend quality time with their kids.
And I'll throw in two more points there. And as you were just mentioning, and Audrey was saying that in a way you're a parent, and then you're just doubling down on that one right there. You know, these teachers can in many ways be parents. And then with all that time that the parents can be away working and such, the pressure for parenting in some of these households goes to the nannies, and that's not a good dynamic either. So that's something else you're working on. And then the whole point of how to parent for, I think, a portion, and here I'm generalizing again, of the parents, they might not have a very deep toolkit, a very deep parenting toolkit. And that's where these international schools really step in and offer so much advice. And in my times working as a counselor, I just found parents almost in tears appreciating the guidance because they didn't know, because they didn't grow up in a household with a wide range of parenting opportunities and learning going on. So I just want to share that as well.
Yeah, and we've got such a hot pot when you think about the different cultures that we have in our schools too, and how to parent. And in some cultures, we're giving the children an international education, but their culture does not fit in the same way. And so that's a real challenge. And those are some really challenging conversations on parenting with parents when they don't know how to discipline at home and trying to teach parents. So we definitely find ourselves doing a lot more as a school because of the range of cultures. And the other side, actually, David, is often our schools don't have the support within the community. So the access to mental health support is much more restricted. Bangkok has one of the worst rates of mental health support per capita. And so that's a real challenge for us. Also, working with authorities can be very, very challenging. So when there are serious situations, sometimes the support you get from authorities, we end up doing a lot more than we would normally do. If you're back stateside or you're here in New Zealand, there would be many more support structures in place. So that's a big, big challenge in the role too.
Speaking of support, and you've touched on mental health, we want to dig a little bit into the idea of digital wellness. And we've looked at the work of Jonathan Haidt, and there are other leaders in the field of digital wellness for students. What are you seeing with your students with the effects of technology and social networks in their lives? And maybe what are some approaches that you've taken to supporting the digital wellness of students?
This is a hot cake. So, I'm very familiar with Jonathan Haidt. I absolutely love his book, Anxious Generation. Also, Johan Hari, The Stolen Focus. Some great research out there about the impact of social media. And in particular, when you look at the smartphone and then you look at the introduction of Instagram, of TikTok, and the rise of mental health issues within teenagers especially, I think obviously it's all, it's causational. Is it truly is it absolutely linked? We can't guarantee, but I believe firmly that it is very linked. And so we as a school have taken a slower approach to it, but what we're seeing around the region, more and more schools are going phone free. It's interesting. I'm here in New Zealand now where the schools in the whole country are phone free. It's actually a law that you can't bring a phone into schools because we know it distracts. And the argument that we get is kids need to learn how to handle and how to manage a phone and have the self-discipline. And so we should be part of that solution, which, I understand, I can hear that. But for myself, I find it very difficult to find any real justification for having a phone in a school. And I think where I see it the saddest is, in a lunchtime where you can walk around the lunch tables that when kids pull it out and there's a kid sitting next to them and they're not talking to them. We do a Week Without Walls type trip. And so we took 38 kids to Bali this last year and we did a surfing and service trip, which was just wonderful. And we allowed kids 15 minutes on their phone at night. By the end of the week, some of the kids were choosing not to get their phone because they realized the benefit of being off their phones. And they all talked about how their personality changed within only 5 days of being off their phone. And the connections they made during that trip, it was one of their biggest talking points. And the kids wrote about this in their reflections where they couldn't quite believe how much it actually changed their outlook on the world. And I think schools who aren't taking time to look at this seriously enough are missing the boat big time. And for myself, it's about the fact that kids become so dependent on, this constant need to scroll or doom scroll, as we say. And, the hormones that are released when they're doing that. And so we're teaching kids to become crack addicts, basically, to their phone. And, the interesting thing, tying it back to the dean of students role, when I have any serious situation of kids with attendance, with depression, with low grades, the first question I ask is, can you get your phone out? And
Really?
let's set your phone next to my phone, and let's go to screen time, and let's take time to look through our values together. And it is always, or almost always, a high correlation of kids spending, I would say, excess of 6-7 hours a day on their phone and issues with school.
Wow.
The worst I had was a kid with about 11 hours a day on their phone. And, I'm not sure how you even live, but they weren't getting sleep. They were up all night as they were addicted pretty much to their phone and being in touch with their friends. So, and it's a fake kind of connection too, which worries me. So super challenging. If kids can learn to control that, and if schools can put boundaries in place, then I think there's much more success in terms of building good relationships in schools.
Wow, that's incredible. The 11 hours. It's like you said, how are they living? I guess that, like you said, they're not sleeping, but
Yeah, correct.
amazing,
Yeah.
amazing.
And I think the difference is, Jonathan Hay points it out very well, this is very gendered too, but for females and also their self-affect and how they see themselves and their self-esteem, I think the negative impact of social media is huge. And I think we're starting to see that also with guys now as well, body image as well, with kids seeing what's the appropriate body image. It worries me also with guys. It worries me about the pornography access that they have on their phone and how that's changing their view on what a relationship looks like. And also the taboo nature of that most schools won't talk about that and won't talk about what the impact of that. So that they're just too nervous to go there and actually have those discussions. But how that's changing the fabric of society over time is a massive concern.
Yeah, well, and learning how to be a good person based on a TikTok influencer doesn't really seem like the best way to go.
No. I'm not too into TikTok. My daughter is, and I try to limit that as much as possible.
Well, back to your point at the start of this, that one of the things that schools do in general is help students with their executive functioning, and that applies to everything, right? And your advisories, I'm sure, are spending time helping kids, just as you were saying, working with their values. So you start with the values, just that self-knowledge, self-understanding, and then you develop, well, how do you live those values? And then you can bring in the juxtaposition of the social networking and times on the phone to see they are not in congruence. But then I can only guess with your instructional technologists, they're teaching, and your teachers are teaching the students how to research, how to ask questions, how to find information, how to synthesize, how to create, all using technology. And that's been a part of the instructional technology programs in international schools now for a long time. So the teaching is going on. But the whole idea that if the kids have those cell phones in the classes, it's just going to be, like you were saying, too distracting, and you're just not going to get anywhere with it. So one thing I'll throw into the show notes is a presentation to help parents start with their values and then connect them to family discussions on how are they living those values and how can students use technology in a healthy manner, because we can't throw it out. It's a part of life. And then there's the whole world of digital citizenship, to me, which is much more that, like you were saying in the lunchroom, I don't like the word digital. I just like the word citizenship, because like you're saying, 9 hours a day is digital and very few are analog, and that's a problem. But working with students in their citizenship is another big theme of international schools as well. So I'll put that out there for our newbies thinking about coming overseas, that these are kind of mainstays of most international schools programs, right?
Yeah. I think if you're not addressing that, then you got a massive hole in your curriculum. And I think the key is actually, how do you put that across all your curriculum? So how do you embed these conversations within English classes and within world studies? And how do you make sure that it's not just a standalone curriculum? That's where it becomes really powerful. But also we talk about, phones not being in classrooms, but I think actually it's not just that. We have a very clear policy that kids can't have a phone in a classroom, always have had that policy. For me, it's also the phones in the social zones. That's where it's a huge impact, because their kids are not noticing the kid who doesn't have a friend, and In those situations, a kid that doesn't have a friend, it's too easy just for them to pull their phone out and look like they're okay and look like they're engaged when actually they're not. And so then they were set with the dopamine fix to make themselves feel good about not having somebody who's sitting next to them, as opposed to if you can create zones where there are no phones and so that all kids have to think about other kids and is everyone included, that creates a good environment for kids to, to be true citizens of it, looking out for each other and making sure all the other kids belong.
Thank you for that. That's so important. All right, let's go a little bit further on the role of Dean of Students. And so what advice would you have for international educators, not just Dean of Students, let me take it back, but who want to move into leadership positions? What advice would you offer them?
Yeah, look, I'm sure in schools there are opportunities to jump in committees and to jump onto smaller positions of responsibility. So in terms of a Dean of Students role, really getting into leading advisory. Most schools who have an advisory program will have grade level leaders that you can jump to that kind of role with that kind of position. Get into student government, making sure that you could be supporting a student council. So getting your teeth kind of into something with a bit more meat on it, where you can actually work with kids in that kind of leadership role. I think the other side or the other reality is that most international schools like to see a qualification. So it's hard to get into leadership positions in international schools if you don't have some kind of certification. Whether you get something stateside or from your home country that you can use in your school, or whether you engage in something like the PTC. I found PTC was some of the best PD that I've ever done. So that's PTC, for those listeners that don't know it, is Principals Training Center. And that PD, I think, was just worth its weight in gold. And to have a week long together with great mentors who are teaching you, and to engage with other great up-and-coming leaders, and the conversations and learning I had were just outstanding. So that would be a great PD opportunity for people to jump on board with. But I mean, really, it's seizing opportunities and having a go. And I guess the other one is don't necessarily wait until you think you're 100% ready. There's the other piece to it. The Jacinda Ardern was the New Zealand Prime Minister here. She's just released this book about a different style of leadership and how she believes in this kindness leadership. But she also talks about this imposter syndrome that she has, that she wasn't quite ready and she didn't feel ready for leadership. But actually, in reality, none of us ever are. And you learn through your authentic self. Being authentic in leadership is actually the key. And admitting when you don't know something means that you can jump into leadership at any point. So I think my philosophy has always been there's no need to climb the ladder super fast. I've never been into wanting to be a quick leader and jump up and become a head of school fast. I want to be really good at what I do. And so take time to be good is another lesson. Like, enjoy the moments you're in, and also put your hand up and try things. And if they fail, seek feedback and look at where you went wrong, because sometimes we make some spectacular mistakes and we learn more from those sometimes than when it all goes well.
Well, it really does sound like you are very adept at this role. And just talking to you, I'm really gathering a sense of how much you care, how authentic you are in your leadership. And I'm just really thrilled we're having this conversation. All right, let's just look into this role of Dean of Students. And like I said, I was never at a school that had something that had that title. What are some of the current and continuing trends that you hear about with this role as it evolves in international schools?
So, Audrey, I think the biggest one is the increase in mental health issues that we're seeing with kids. That would probably be number one. I think part of that is linked to social media, as we talked about earlier. I think it's linked to, obviously, phone usage with kids. I mean, we see mental health issues arising from kids who are using too much of their phone and the dependency with that. But it's not just that. I mean, we have kids with all sorts of situations. And it's interesting, as you get better at the social and emotional learning stuff, and as you get better at kids sharing what's going on, you also find out more, which is wonderful. And that's a great thing. So we have helped so many kids in different situations that I think we may have missed in the past because we weren't doing as good a job at checking in with kids. But the mental health piece, and especially the anxiety we see, is pretty high with a lot of kids. And I can't help but see that also being tied to the major trend right now, which is the pressures of college and the pressures of college acceptances, which, David, we talked about a bit before. We touched on that. The reality is the pressures on our kids in international schools to get into top-end schools, and in particular, we have a very US-centric Ivy League focus often, or top 20 world schools, but often it's a top kind of US Ivy League focus. That seems to be the dream of a lot of kids. The number of kids that say, I'm going to get into Harvard, Stanford, is so disproportional to the amount that will actually get in. And as we look at schools that used to be safety schools for us sometimes, they're now becoming not at all safety schools. And acceptance rates, a lot of those universities, is changing immensely. At the same time, we've got this geopolitical situation that's going on where, we now have kids that did get into some of their dream schools in the US, and because they're from Laos, because they're from Myanmar, they can no longer go. And so suddenly their whole world is turned upside down. And so I think as schools, one of the things we're shifting to, or our college team is doing a great job, is looking at other options. And so our college team runs sessions like Beyond the 30. So beyond the top 30 universities, looking at liberal arts colleges around the US. There are some great liberal arts colleges that people can go to, which are going to give outstanding education and pathways still that kids could do masters in top Ivy League schools if they wanted to. But the match for some of our kids also is going to be a better match for kids that come to a small school where there's a lot of care and then dumped into a big, massive school. That match isn't necessarily always great. And so a small liberal arts college where they're going to get personalized education is going to be a much better match for those kids. But also looking at other places around the world. So we have had a lot of kids going to IE in Spain, for example, which is a great university. Looking at Australia now, there's, I think to the top 20 universities now are actually Melbourne and University of New South Wales. So I think people are seeing that as a trend now, that there are more options, and helping kids understand that. But the pressure definitely of college placement and the stress of that is quite immense on kids. And I think that there's a challenge there, which is also making sure that school isn't just about get a college placement. And what I think is my number one frustration would be kids who do things because they feel they have to do it to get to college, as opposed to doing it because they are passionate and they love doing it. And I think if you're a kid that does things because they love to do it, and if they develop their passion truly, and their passion for learning, their passion for activities or service, then you're a great kid to be admitted to any university. If it's the other way around, then what is the end goal? And okay, once you're into that university, what do you do next? And what's important in life? Like actually doing these activities and doing service and doing all these other pieces in school is about developing a well-rounded person and creating behaviors and habits that will hopefully extend into life. And all our schools have these wonderful mission statements. That's actually what we're trying to do. It's not just get them into college. So I think we have to be true to our mission statements and our vision statements of our international schools and actually push beyond just college admittance.
Well, and to your point, if you adopt a habit during your school years of ticking boxes to look good, what is your life going to be like? You're going to continuously be adopting behaviors that will allow you to tick boxes in order to look good as an adult too and beyond. So I think that's a really powerful message you're sending out there. Just a quick aside, my daughter did go to Harvard and it was not a great fit. So for any of those students out there who have that as their, golden calf or whatever, the fit matters a lot more.
Yeah. Well, and unfortunately, I feel like it's not just the kids, it's the parents that want to put it out. And David, you see this in Bangkok, but this is a generalization, but for some parents, I think the child's college acceptance is more of a badge of honor for them than it is actually for the child. And that's bonkers. It should not be that way around. So, but I also get it. They're paying a lot of money and there is a reality. If I'm paying $30,000 a year or $40,000 a year, then I have an expectation that my child is going to go to a great university, but it should be an expectation that my child goes to the university that's the best fit for them, that will allow them to flourish. Is the key.
Yeah, like what makes a great university?
That could be another hour-long conversation.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So I'll interject as a product of liberal arts education, going to a small college in the South, in North Carolina. I really believe in the opportunities there, and the United States is filled with liberal arts colleges. But to your greater point, there's so many choices around the world, and geopolitically right now, it really could be difficult with immigration for foreign students, non-U.S. students, to be coming to the U.S., especially like you're pointing out. You get so excited and you think you're going to school XYZ, and then something happens that you're not able to go. So one of my big hopes, and I'm a broken record on this, especially having spent so much time in Asia, I want to find ways for school communities, school leaders to be super brave, because there is some possibilities whether you're going to keep your job if you push the parents too much on saying, let's back off a little bit on these certain kind of the top 30 or top 20, that we really want to follow the mantra that all college counselors follow, I think, is finding the right fit. So that the more that schools can do that type of communication, starting in elementary, then into middle, and helping the parents understand with that cultural understanding you hit on about 15 minutes ago, and I hit on a little bit on the economic side with the families just often being, not often, sometimes just a couple generations away from poverty, and building those educational opportunities for parents and building networks within the parent community to bridge the different groups. Because I've been at some schools, there's people from this country and the people from this country, and how can you bring people together around that common language of what's best for students with an understanding of what's specific about the culture of your country, certain things that you would want for your children outside going to super strong academic schools as well. So that's a whole nother area of discussion. As we wrap up, we want to go up to 30,000 feet. You've provided so much helpful information. And we talk about trends a lot, and you've shared several trends. Are there any more from your PLN when you're out at conferences or talking to other educators, maybe not just in Asia, or people that you've known that have gone to schools around the world? Are there a couple more, 2 or 3 other trends in international education that you might share?
Yeah, I think the other major hot topic right now is AI, which is huge. And, it's interesting in my role because AI is often linked to academic malpractice, or kids misunderstanding it, or kids' poor time management. I haven't done my assignment. Chat GPT, let's do it for me. I mean, the best one is we had a kid turn one in recently, which still had the Chat GPT prompt at the top. And the kid said, I did it myself. And then, what's this prompt here? So, we're seeing that, which is a challenge. And to be fair, it's something which I think we have to embrace to a certain degree. It definitely worries me, though, a lot of what we're seeing. I was at the ECIS leadership conference recently in Stuttgart, and that was a big theme that was flowing through, was AI, but also well-being and flourishing. And so they had these two kind of going together, these two threads. And the AI stuff, I think everyone walked out just absolutely terrified, because the deep fakes, and we had people who were doing presentations with throwing videos together that weren't real within 2 or 3 minutes, and the impact that could have on kids. So there's a threat to it, but there's also a wonderful tool there which we can use as well. And so I think I've been excited to see, like, our school hasn't been scared of it. We've tried to use it, and we're trying to teach kids, how do you use this to actually be a great learning tool, understand its limitations, and also understand that in the end, we want you to think yourself. Like, the goal is that we want kids to move, I think, from dependence to independence to like interdependence. And that's kind of my philosophy on education, right? Where you start real young, dependent on other people, and then you become this ability to stand on your own 2 feet, and then you realize where your weaknesses are and you allow other people to fill in. AI can actually be part of that interdependence. And how do we use it in the right way and understand our weaknesses, or where it can be much stronger than us, without becoming too dependent on it? But it's a big issue, and I think we're seeing big problems with it also in terms of, obviously, assignments for kids, how we do assessment now. This is a big, big problem for teachers, and they're nervous about any assignment they give to a kid. Are they just going to AI it? And how do you know if you can actually really ensure that a student's work is their own? That's a real challenge. It's not going to go, and I think we just have to understand the limitations of it. But I don't think it's going to remove education. There's no way this is going to be the one masterful thing that's going to take over everything. But I think what it's actually going to speak to is the need for schools to ensure that we're teaching values, teaching decision-making, teaching executive functioning, etc. Yeah.
Well, this has been such an informative discussion, and it's so helpful to hear your perspective on what is, again, a big topic in international education and in all education, is the whole child, and taking all of it into consideration between their background and their skills and their self-confidence and capabilities and so on, and just taking all of that and really getting to know them and looking for ways to support them and bring them up and parent them, if you will. I'm wondering if there's anything, as we wind down, anything else you might like to share for our audience.
Yeah, I guess the thing I haven't spoken of at all really is how you get this done. You don't achieve it by yourself. You do it with your teachers, right? And so
Interdependence.
It is interdependence. Yep. And so I think the other major thing actually for schools is, how do we deal with all the stress that's on teachers as well? And so I've talked a lot about student well-being, staff well-being, and ensuring that teachers feel part of the community. You can't do this unless you get that right. And so, although I'm a dean of students, a big piece of the role has to be working really close with faculty and building that trust and working as a team, because it's not me that does the change, it's our team that works together, and the whole faculty that comes together to support kids. And I think we forget we just had COVID only a few years back, and we forget that these stresses that kids feel also fall on teachers' shoulders. And we're asking teachers to care for kids a lot more. We're asking for them to do a lot more, and sometimes don't feel that they have the skill set or the training in it. But actually, I think it's not as hard as some teachers think. Actually, being a good advisor, being a great teacher, very, very similar. Caring for kids is a skill set that we all have. And I think most teachers who got into the profession got into it because they really care about kids. But making sure there are good support structures for your staff are critical as well, in terms of making sure all this work happens well.
Thank you for bringing that up, because that was a question that was on my mind, how you support your teachers with PD and such. And as you were saying, in your evolution, the first step is really, in my mind, becoming a listener and just being ready to listen and validate emotions. And then, because your school is so team oriented, ready to say, okay, I know who we can go talk to more about this as a way to assist students. So as we look at ways, if people want to follow you, I'm thinking, maybe this fall I'll be out at Chattachuk and you'll be at a department meeting and I'll be able to talk to you. But how can regular people who don't live in Bangkok follow you?
So I am on LinkedIn. I don't have a massive presence online. This is actually, I said to you, David, this is my first podcast ever. So it is interesting.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks, Audrey. I definitely looking at ways to maybe put myself out there a bit more. I think it would be fun to share more and share some of my thinkings on education and doing more on that.
Just once again, really, really appreciated this chat, and you've given us so much of an inside view, a peek, as David would say, under the hood of what a dean of students is all about. And it does sound, I said earlier, but I'm going to just repeat it. It bears repeating, that it just sounds like you really are such a great person for this role. Your caring, your compassion, your thoughtfulness, your goal to proactively support students really, really shone through. Thank you so much for taking the time to be part of this interview. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, both of you, Audrey and David. It's actually been really wonderful just to talk about the craft, and it's quite fun to chat more.
The craft. That's a great way to put it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us today on Educators Going Global.
You can find this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, and all the other usual suspects.
Please subscribe, like us, and leave a review on Apple and Spotify, and let your teaching friends know about us so we can grow our community.
Please reach out at educatorsgoingglobal@gmail.com and join our Facebook group, Educators Going Global, if you have ideas, comments, or wish to share a Going Global story of your own.
You can also find us on Instagram at Educators Going Global.
Please visit our website as well, www.educatorsgoingglobal.com. All our podcast episodes are on there by topic, along with blog posts, Going Global stories, and our ever-growing resource library. For now, this is Audrey
and David,
inviting you to travel,
teach,
and connect with us.